So how's the progress going for building this whole agentic agent that trades for me, learns and makes its own decisions and gets better over time? That's what I'm going to delve into. This is now week 2 of development for my agentic trader. Welcome. This is Luis. I'm the founder of the Independent Quant, where I help traders take their trading ideas and convert them into algorithmic strategies. And this series, I'm talking about the building of a agentic solution, which I'm using AI to build or convert a systematic strategy that has a lot of discretion in it. It's a strategy that I've been using for the last 3 years or so. If you've been following along, we've gave a video on just the foundation of it, then the wrap up for week 1. This is the wrap up for week 2. So I'll bring the diagram up real fast to catch everyone up if you haven't watched those videos. So here you find the idea of what I'm building. And if I'm not going to go and rehash everything on how I kind of arrived at this, please go watch the videos where I discuss where this all came from. I really want to focus on what's happened in this second week. But ultimately, if you saw from the last video, I discussed that this is not an architecture diagram. I walked you through how I architect a cloud solution. This is more an idea. I mentioned how I have never architected a agentic AI solution, so I don't know all the different components and how they're going to interact with one another. I do know some of the relationships from this diagram here, just by virtue of knowing how this is all going to work. And what I also mentioned in the last video was that I had the Amazon OpenSearch service, which is what is running my RAG. I deployed that in the first week as a serverless solution. Turned out that it was $10 a day, blew up my budget for that I had set for this. The goal for this week was to switch the open service from a serverless solution over to just a resource solution, no serverless. And I was hoping that I would make as much progress this week as I did in the first week. Fortunately, that wasn't the case. It took a lot of understanding what the challenges were in using OpenSearch. It's a brand new service for me. So it was a lot of time spent in the documentation, understanding what its requirements were, how it worked, how to really include it in an architecture. So that was the first big major part. And if you remember from the first video also, or the first week, I described that one of the challenges is how to organize the stacks for this. Now, for you, if you haven't deployed a solution to AWS or to the cloud, usually you take all your services and you group them. You put them in a stack. Usually there's philosophies, there's no methodology or best practice for that you could find. It really goes use case by use case. There are some guiding principles, but they're not set in stone. You pretty much use your own experience to how to do those. For me, I have my own kind of method of applying and what type of services I want to group together, understanding how quickly those or how often those services need to be updated and whether or not to segregate them because of that. I don't have any of that information for this one. And I was working off of a 2-stack system where I had OpenSearch being deployed as its own, and then I had all the other services grouped in another stack. For week 2, I broke that down even further. I said, okay, well, OpenSearch needs to be its own thing because the indexing is still an issue. I still have to go on the console after the service has been provisioned, to go ahead and build the index. So that's became a sole single service stack. Now I'm using AWS CDK again to do all this. So that's working fine. I've got no qualms with that, but I've got a lot of experience with AWS CDK, so it's really not going to be the hang up for me. I created a second stack to do pretty much all the other services, all the action groups, which are Lambda functions and DynamoDB, along with the S3 buckets, which holds the knowledge base for the OpenSearch. But then I added a third stack, which was the orchestration. That was the stack now that has how these services are going to talk to one another. If you look back in my first week video, I described how I used Event Bridge to do that. Not really using Event Bridge here for that. Not going to delve in too much into the diagramming for that because it's very much in test phase as far as just the coding of it. I haven't had it successfully deploy yet. So, and the reason that is the time between the stacks, getting OpenSearch to deploy, then going in and building the index, getting errors for the index build. All that has really been a bit of a grind. Hmm, it's all user error, just inexperience in using these services here. So really wish I had more to report on just this. If anything, I'll do a quick little deep dive on the OpenSearch service, and so you can understand what RAG is and what it is that I'm trying to do here, and why building this out with the S3 has been such a challenge. So let me switch over to my Amazon account and kind of show you what these services are, and really pull up the documentation, kind of do a quick tutorial on OpenSearch. Okay, so here we are looking at the documentation for Amazon OpenSearch service or AWS OpenSearch. This is what I've had to kind of really come in and delve a lot into. I did use Gen AI a lot to ask questions to learn. The problem is hallucinations. This week, a lot of the conversations I had with Gen AI would tell me things. I would change my code to comply with what it told me, or I would ask it to generate the code to do that for me. And I was using both ChatGPT and Claude to do that. Claude is usually pretty good, but in this scenario, it just wasn't. I think it was trained on older OpenSearch data. That's my best guess because I would come in and it would do its typical Gen AI thing of telling me one thing and then updating itself later. It's like, oh no, I was wrong, blah, 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 blah. And that made things just a lot more difficult than they should have been. Um, the OpenSearch service, what I'm trying to use it for here is this RAG, retrieval augmented generation, enhances element responses with relevant context. I mentioned in my architecture that I'm using my trading journal to help the LLM identify what a rounded top and a rounded bottom is, looking at that information that's coming out of the analyze pattern action group from the Lambda. And so it's trying to use that. And the way OpenSearch is doing that is all that knowledge base is created in an S3 bucket, which is hung in my S3 service. And then OpenSearch, you tell it, hey, go to that bucket and vectorize so that the LLM can now do a vectorized semantic search, which again, if that's a foreign concept for you, it means that it is not searching for literal specific information. For example, if I tell it search for coffee shops, it's going to find anything that can be labeled a coffee shop, be that a Starbucks, be that a Dunkin'. I guess it's just Dunkin' now, not just Dunkin' Donuts, but Dunkin'. It'll bring up all that stuff. If it was not a vectorized search and it was a literal search, then it would only come back with those businesses that are named coffee shop. So that's important because for the LLM, when I'm asking it, hey, check this round the top, round the bottom, verify whether it is or is not a round the top, round the bottom, the LLM has to go through all the S3 bucket and find the relevant information it needs to make that determination. And it can only really do that using a vectorized search. So that was something. Now, if you look at the documentation here, this is one of the things that made it a little harder for me. OpenSearch is a new service for me. So just kind of navigating the documentation, knowing all the different things that it did was not immediately obvious to me. I like it just even finding vector search. I didn't know that that was what I was aiming to do. I didn't, understand the functionality of it. So it took me a bit of time going through here. I bit off on this serverless and I started going through the OpenSearch servers list. I'm like, serverless is usually the best way to go. I mentioned in week one how that turned into an absolute catastrophe. So I had to come back to vector search and found this, configure our vector store to index document embeddings. And this is where I've kind of really spent a lot of my time this second week, is just understanding what the requirements are for it to, one, create the knowledge base, map to that knowledge base, create the vector store for that knowledge base. And that has slowed me down significantly. It slowed me down as far as development. No, big blue arrow as far as where I'm going and what I'm building. It's foundational information, right? It's learning new technologies that it's going to bear fruit sooner rather than later. It's just, again, we iterate till we're successful. So that was a lot of where this second week was just spent. Looking through the prerequisites here for using the vector store and scrolling down, I already mentioned that the managed clusters was not something that I wanted to do, or the serverless was something I want to do. So I'm doing these Amazon S3 vectors, and just going through here, it talks about the required permissions, the metadata that I can attach as key value pairs. Didn't need to do any of that for that. I'm also looking at whether or not this is probably my better solution. So going into week 3, I'll be doing both. Right now, I'm using Amazon S3 vectors in the code that I wrote up, but I'm prepared to have to switch maybe to an OpenSearch service managed cluster to help with this querying of all the information in S3. Now, could I do this without using a RAG? I would say no, because I'm using a strategy that is systematic. So I could code a lot of that in. The challenge is that there's a significant amount of discretion in each one of these in how I determine whether something is around the top or around the bottom. And to give a visual description, let me pull up my trading journal and kind of show what I'm looking at, what I'm describing, and what I need the agent to do for me. So I copy a lot of my images of my actual trading into my trading journal, and I describe what's happening and what I'm thinking and what I'm seeing. And this is an example of me identifying, hey, there is a rounded top developing, which is price is slowing down in its journey upward. It's getting harder and harder for it to make new highs. So I'm looking for it to turn, and these are the controlling swing lows. So I want to see price decisively break below these pivots, and I've got my measuring tool out ready to go, measure the candle, measure to see if I've got 2.5 to 1 risk reward. I really want this target to be above this level of support up here. And all of that requires some level of discretion. I can measure these, of course. This impulse up is much larger than this impulse up. So naturally, that is a good indication of around the top. This impulse up is larger than this impulse up. Again, more indication that it's slowing down. If I use traditional algorithmic or traditional coding to describe that, I would need to tell it how to calculate the distance between these pivots. Now, notice that using this indicator here, it's able to identify these as the pivot highs, but it completely missed this pivot here prior to it. So how can I consistently tell it to calculate these pivots, to find the highs, to really measure these? Well, for that's where the agent is supposed to come in for all this. Is it's supposed to be able to discern these slowdowns, and it's going to have to do that based off of calculations, which the Lambda function is doing. It is providing certain calculations. It most definitely would be able to see this portion here as a slowdown, maybe not this one here, because it didn't catch this pivot high. Now, this indicator is not mine. This is an indicator that's available for TradingView. I'm using it kind of for helping this visual discussion, and I do use it in trading, but it doesn't make decisions for me as far as when I'm trading with it. So I need a way for it to be able to discern price slowing down, and that is discretion. I mean, I could sit here and make measurements, but I don't measure when I trade. The context of the candles, what types of candles there are. One of my trainings was candle reading. So, spinning tops, hammer bottoms, these are all things that help us read the chart. And I didn't want to weigh down the agent with all that information, but I do want it to be able to find a way to identify these slowdowns. So what I've done is when I write my journal, go back to a page where I'm writing it. You see here, I am writing. If we see here, here's the image before the image I just shared with you all. Shared with you. I say, hey, a rounded top is forming. I need prices decisively break below the pivot low to declare the rounded top. And I'm giving commentary. Overall, the daily trend is down. However, the daily is hitting support. So that may make a downtrend a bit choppy. Giving all the commentary, 1033, rounded top is developing further. However, it is also creating higher pivot lows. So this is more of a triangle or wedge. So this is my commentary that I typically do just to myself in my mind, but for the benefit of the agent, it needs to have all this. And the way LLMs are trained is they are trained, you have all this model information, but it will naturally not have anything that I'm journaling, right? That is unique knowledge that I'm creating. So for me to be able to provide that to the LLM, it's got to come through a RAG. And that's the hurdle of this second week and how to take all of this and describe it well. I've been journaling a lot more detailed the last week or two because I understand now that it's like, hey, in order for this to not just be valuable for myself, it needs to be valuable for the agent. I need to be more detailed in how describing what's happening. I've also been adding a lot more images or screenshots of my trading of the rounded top developing and all that so that there is more information for the large language model to work with. The way LLMs are trained, they use an immense amount of data. They use petabytes of data or even more. So I don't think that I could be too detailed or provide too much information. I guess I could provide junk, right? But I can't really provide too much information. So I want to provide as much quality information and ways for me to think. And then I also comment what I've done wrong, what I've read wrong, and what I could have done better, all with the hopes that all that extra information will help the agent think more human-like and have more discretion for the discretionary part of the systematic trade, right? You and I can look at this chart and we can see price slowing down both to the downside and the upside, while the computer can't as easily as us. So that's been the biggest challenge this second week here. I'll hopefully be able to deploy all this stuff going into the third week. And goal again would be for the third week to have a minimum viable product that I can use to start sim trading with. And I would love to have just a working model so that I can iterate and improve that rather than still being stuck on the architecture point of all this. But thanks so much for tuning into this episode. Follow along by going to the Independent Quant, signing up for the newsletter. It's all free. You'll get emails from me on everything that's going on here with the development of this agentic algo, along with everything else that I'm doing at the Independent Quant. My publishing cycle on YouTube is slower than what it is on the site itself. So you may have early access to a lot of this content before I ever publish it to YouTube. So hope everything's going well with your trading and that life is treating you good. And I appreciate your time. And I look forward to seeing you again in the next video. Till then, keep it green.